Maryland is bordered by the Chesapeake Bay and Pennsylvania in the north, and a small piece of Virginia in the south. In the east, Maryland is bordered by the Atlantic Ocean and Delaware. West Virginia and Virginia border Maryland in the west. The mid portion of the state is interrupted by Washington, D.C., which was originally part of Montgomery and Prince George's counties. Before its coastline was explored by Europeans in the 16th century, Maryland was inhabited by several groups of Native Americans, mostly by Algonquian peoples, and to a lesser degree Iroquoian and Siouan. George Calvert, first Baron Baltimore, applied to Charles I for a royal charter for what was to become the province of Maryland. After Calvert died in April 1632, the charter for Maryland colony was granted to his son, Celius Calvert, 2nd Baron Baltimore, on the 20th of June, 1632. The colony was named in honor of Queen Henrietta Maria, the wife of King Charles I. Maryland's early settlements and population centers clustered around rivers and other waterways that empty into the Chesapeake Bay. Tobacco was the main export crop in the colonial era. It involved a great deal of hand labor, usually done by slaves. The original royal charter granted Maryland the Potomac River and territory northward to the 40th parallel. This was found to be a problem, as the northern boundary would have put Philadelphia, the major city in Pennsylvania, within Maryland. The Calvert family, which controlled Maryland, and the Penn family, which controlled Pennsylvania, decided in 1750 to engage two surveyors, Charles Mason and Jeremiah Dixon, to establish a boundary. They surveyed what became known as the Mason-Dixon line, which became the boundary between the two colonies. Maryland was an active participant in the events leading up to the American Revolution, and by 1776 its delegates signed the Declaration of Independence. Many of its citizens subsequently played key political and military roles in the war. In 1790, the state ceded land for the establishment of the U.S. capital of Washington, D.C. Maryland covers 12,407 square miles, making it the 42nd largest of the 50 states. It is comparable in overall area with Belgium and the state of Hawaii. The state's topography is very diverse, ranging from sandy dunes in the east to low marshlands with an abundance of wildlife near the Chesapeake Bay, to gently rolling hills in the Piedmont region and forested mountains to the west. Maryland has two climates, due to variances in elevation and proximity to water. The eastern side of the state near the Atlantic coast has a humid subtropical climate, influenced by the Chesapeake Bay and the Atlantic Ocean, while the western side of the state, with its higher elevations, has a continental climate with cooler temperatures. The central parts of the state waver with the weather in between. Most of the state's waterways are part of the Chesapeake Bay watershed. The highest point in Maryland is Hoycrest on Backbone Mountain in the southwest corner of Garrett County, with an elevation of 3,360 feet. There are no natural lakes in the state, but there are numerous man-made lakes. The largest of these is Deep Creek Lake. As is typical of states on the East Coast, Maryland's plant life is abundant and healthy. A modest volume of annual precipitation helps to support many types of plants, including seagrass and various reeds at the smaller end of the spectrum to the gigantic white oak, a huge example of white oak, the state tree, which can grow over 60 feet tall. Most of the population of Maryland lives in the central region of the state, in the Baltimore metropolitan area and Washington metropolitan area, both of which are part of the Baltimore-Washington metropolitan area. The majority of Maryland's population is concentrated in the cities and suburbs surrounding Washington, D.C., as well as in and around Maryland's most populous city, Baltimore. Historically, these and many other Maryland cities developed along the fall line, the line along which rivers, brooks, and streams are interrupted by rapids and waterfalls. The capital city is Annapolis. In 2022, about 6.16 million people people lived in Maryland. This is a slight decrease from the previous year, when there were about 6.17 million people. In 1960, the resident population of Maryland stood at about 3.1 million people. Maryland is the 18th most populous state in the country. In 2021, the real gross domestic product of Maryland was about $364 billion. This is an increase from the previous year, when the state's GDP stood at $353 billion. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, Maryland households are currently the wealthiest in the country, with a 2013 median household income of $72,000, which puts it ahead of New Jersey and Connecticut, which are second and third, respectively. Two of Maryland's counties, Howard and Montgomery, are the second and 11th wealthiest counties in the nation, respectively. In spite of its tiny size, the state of Maryland is extremely influential and powerful.